Dear people of concern, by the way, this is not about the House Foreign Affairs Committee, but it is about both the Appropriations Committee and the Budget Committee, just so you know, as well as the Finance Committee. All of you guys should have been interested in this. You should have also already responded to acts of insider trading, acts of bond fraud, all of those things. Here's the situation. I'm personally living proof that a federal student loan is actually a capital outlay. Even if I was just a specific exception, it doesn't matter. The federal student loan program is part of capital outlays. And part of that is also about a refusal over the last several years to discuss honestly intangible property and intellectual property and products of intellectual property, including in connection with the college admissions process, as well as what happens to academic writings or assignments that get given to undergraduates while they're actually attending school. And these are all very important matters that other people that are really, really interested in education and want to do things safe with should be involved with actual grounded, legitimate policy in regards to. I've had a concern for a long time, and I actually requested a formal investigation into a potential disciplinary grievance against the former First Lady, with my understanding that she was licensed to practice law specific to intellectual property and was also a liaison for the community at the University of Chicago during a time frame when people from the community were lobbying to have a trauma center set up as a way to address racial injustice. But nobody seemed to take interest in the college admissions process that required people to go through an online application process wherein participation required one to sign a user agreement saying that the company was released of any liability having to do with abuse of anything that happened during the application process. And by the way, they could use anything connected to your application process and put it for sale and sell it to other people without having to owe you any financial remuneration, without having to recognize any of your rights to claiming anything connected with the products that they made with it, and without providing you with any accommodation in the event that it was sold and used in manners, including manners that might have been contrary to your intention. Not only did they do that, but they lied to people and misrepresented the time frame during which they were providing that service. They were not providing those services in 1995, but they were representing two other people as if they were. All of these things were happening specifically with that university and were allowed to be put into effect as part of the alleged higher education paradigm since at least 2000. All of these things were completely unconstitutional, and not only were they unconstitutional, but I believe they were part of a process that was attempting to extort people upon their entrance into college, or even just the application into college, into divesting themselves of their claims to their own intellectual property, their own intangible property, and potentially setting them up for coercion or extortion into organized criminal activity later on in their life. That is nothing appropriate. There's nothing appropriate about that at any sort of process, any sort of financing process, specifically anything having to do with the congressional appropriations process. Now, I contend that my federal student loan to go to a private university came after credit I had acquired after attending a DoD school that provided the financing to allow me to attend community college courses concurrent to my senior year of high school. My understanding is the appropriations for my education started with the Department of Defense. And from there, it was then allowed to be put into a consideration with programs that were being appropriated as part of federal student loans that were awarded as part of the 1993 Omnibus Budget Reconciliation Act. It has specific terms concerning federal student loans, including ones in default, that could be assessed in conjunction with 91-day Treasury notes up to and including 25 years later. There were specific benchmarks set on the years of 1995 and the years of 1996. We are now in the 25th year of benchmarks that were set up on federal student loans that were issued in 1996. I've been following this actively for 5 years. I can prove that not only was my so-called higher education used as part of a capital outlay process for the federal budget, but that several times it was reprogrammed. And I believe that I was reprogrammed along with it is intentional acts of political retaliation for dissent I had at the time, including dissent I had in what would otherwise have been a legitimate process of political participation, but that were misrepresented and engaged in an underhanded manner because somebody took it upon themselves to misrepresent the terms of what was going on literally in order to further their own political gain. It's not my fault if people who found a way for some reason somehow to get legitimized as a member of Congress or a member of the government had to base the credit they had on loaning out people who were very young. And then the participation of those people who were very young could potentially impact whatever it was they set up using loaners on young people. If you accepted a loan that was based on the intangible property of a 12-year-old girl, and 10 years down the road you want to apply for another level of public office, and she does not comport with your political agenda, you have no right to illicitly and illegally reprogram her life by reprogramming the underlying appropriations you've coded into her federal student loan in order to sabotage her future and then attempt to misrepresent and slander her. That's what happened to me, and I contend that's what's happened to a lot of other people, and as part of the serious and egregious crimes that occurred with the Affordable Care Act, specifically in connection with defrauding the Social Security Trust and defrauding Medicare and Medicaid. Now we're in this situation where they're talking about this federal student loan situation that's come up. We're a little over into the second month of what was supposed to be the period for repayment on those student loans. Let me remind you, in July of last year, the House of Representatives, under the leadership of Speaker Pelosi, agreed to table for 1 month a bill that would have offered student loan forgiveness. And the problem is, I do not believe that it is any such thing as student loan forgiveness. Somebody needs to acknowledge that federal student loans are part of a capital outlay process. Needs to be honest with people. It might be in a situation where they're still obligated to some sort of term of service in connection with their federal student loans, even if it might be embarrassing to have to admit, well, we didn't actually give you a loan. It was actually a capital outlay, and now with the other things that have been going on with the budget, we kind of need money here, and we need certain people to be doing things that are going to justify these appropriations. That's what's happened in the last 25 years. And in the meantime, people have been significantly misappropriated, and the misappropriation has had societal consequences, not only on the contributions they could make to the private sector in order to allow for people to be able to do things in the private sector. I don't know, like small business that doesn't require a 300% bloated comparative allocation for the administration of the program versus what you actually give to the actual small businesses. You see, this is very important. Why did you need 3 times as much for the administration of the SBA than you did for the actual awards you were going to give? Including an understanding that there was a specific modality by which small business assistance was going to be provided to minority-owned businesses and women-owned businesses. Certain things were required of certain kinds of businesses depending upon how they demographically qualified. But meanwhile, even despite that, there's a situation of the administration of the small business program needing to have 3 times as much money for its administration as the actual programs that are being provided. Why? Is that because of past misappropriations as part of past capital outlay programs that are being attempted for an obscuration and recalibration? So a lot of what otherwise would have been a legitimate potential investment and investiture of small business acumen, including by people I don't know who may have potentially qualified for small business assistance based upon the credit they established in repayment on a federal student loan. You're no longer eligible for that, and you're trying to offset the difference with a bloated budget for the actual federal program. Because that's what it sounds like you're doing. And in the meantime, what if you're somebody who was actually a legitimate potential or actual small business owner? Well, now it's tax season, right? I am not going to let you try to use my LLC to compel me into acts of prostitution in order to deal with taxes. I can pay taxes. I can go through a process and I can fill out a tax form and I can discuss what's an appropriate deduction or what would be an appropriate investment in my small business. I can talk about what would be an appropriate consideration of assets, including consideration what would be an appropriate concept of a depreciation, considering those assets. But if you're allowing for some ultra military or ultra governmental organization to intentionally defraud small businesses and try to compel us to agree to cooperate with unconstitutional and illegal activity under the guise of another appropriation through the federal government, that's not my fault. That's not my fault. And it falls on Congress to do something about that as appropriate. It's not acceptable. And I contend this is exactly what's happened in the last 10 years. Another generation of young people were misinformed. And what happened was there was somebody attempted to coerce young people into agreeing to intentionally engage in financially irresponsible behavior with the delusion that they would just be able to either write it off or at some point down the road after they defaulted on their federal student loans, that somebody else would have to pick it up, and that there was some perhaps justification for there being an unfair situation going involved. But the point of the matter is they were defrauded. We were defrauded from the onset when they said it was about a loan, when really it was about a capital outlay process. I have tracked how my capital outlay obligation was reprogrammed from a destroyer to a submarine, and then reprogrammed from one kind of housing assistance to Indian housing assistance, and then was reprogrammed from what would have otherwise been appropriate expenditures and investments and outlays connected to counter narcotics trafficking that also could have provided components for the development of chemical and biological weapons into Medicare and some sort of secret Department of State service requirement that required a complete disappearance of my entire professional history prior to a fraudulently acquired diagnosis for healthcare treatment. These are all things that are demonstrably evident in successive years of appropriations bills that had associated with them projections on outlays and expected timeframes to check in with those outlays and appropriations that were followed up at later points in time. This was not about federal student loan default. There is no forgiveness for this. This is not an accurate reflection of even what you're asking for. What you need is an appropriate characterization of the people upon which those outlays were originally allowed to be set up, to see who and what is available to actually perform those obligations, and then whatever reprogramming is necessary has to take into account what is available to fulfill the need or the demand, and then to appropriately account for what remains from there. You have people that have been programmed in completely contrary manners to what they're actually capable of and what we actually need. And it is not acceptable to continue allowing for graft and corruption to take priority over any other possibility. If you got people that cannot exist in the political sphere without intentionally sabotaging scores of other people to cover up for their crime, well, then you've already violated your mandate. You might as well just step down and let the rest of us get the books and figure it out ourselves. It is not acceptable that scores of people are being lied to and told that we owe for some sort of debt, that we're supposed to appeal to you for forgiveness, when that's not what it's about. The federal government has been consistently irresponsible with its accounting for at least 25 years that I personally can attest to. In 2 years, I alone, with no one to talk to, have been plenty fiscally responsible, including at the level of the federal budget. But you don't acknowledge me. You don't acknowledge me, and you don't allow for me and what I'm capable of to be a part of that in a legitimate manner. And in the meantime, who's representing a woman like me? None of you are representing me. How many other people in this country are not actually being represented accurately because you're too busy trying to lie to us and tell us we owe for debt that really just seems to be about covering up for crime that you are insisting on trying to continue perpetuating? What I saw last night and today, these are serious crimes. There's nobody owes for this. This was not a loan. You do not take out a loan like this. If we have obligations as citizens, they need to be accurately accounted for and reflected. You never know who would step up into what. But if you're going to continue to deceive people and try to terrorize people, you're not going to get much traction. We don't owe you anything. We don't have anything to be forgiven. Be honest about what's going on. It's too late for you to continue playing these games.